the 3-week drawing that we do here for our portrait should follow the same progression as what we've done the last couple weeks. I do want you to box, anchor, scheme, and then if you're working from a vantage point that's more front on and framed by the hair, perhaps a secondary box indicating the face, and then scheme. And then go ahead and start shadow mapping out the features. If you're still having trouble with proportions and placement, I encourage you to use a box for every single shadow map. But we should be able to get a little further on this particular drawing. And so you have the option of working on toned paper. I have this is a demonstration, a 3-week demonstration here on toned paper. So you can kind of see the level of refinement we might expect to have. The accuracy should be there whether or not it's fleshed out 100% or 50% or 10%. Once you get to the shadow map and thus are able to push it to a notan, it should look a lot like the model. And if it doesn't look like the model, it's a big red flag that we have to stop and correct the issue before we advance to the shading portion. Early in your career as a student, I strongly discourage you from that philosophy that most people tend to have of, I'll fix it as I work it further in the future. That doesn't always pan out. More frequently, it does not pan out, and the drawing starts to crumble, and then students say, I overworked it, etc., etc. So I encourage you to get it right. If after the shadow map you fill in the notan and it doesn't look at least 95 to 100% like the model, you need to stop and figure out what it is, what shapes were missed, and how to correct them before advancing on. And sometimes those shapes are very, very subtle. It could be a chin is out a millimeter or two too far, or in too far, or the lips aren't protruding enough, or perhaps the nose is angled just a little bit too much, or the eye socket is set back a hair. You know, these little tiny micro measurements on a portrait are very noticeable. So we have to make sure we stop and correct those before advancing. So this obviously was a demonstration. I wasn't working the whole time. So if this represents for me half the time that we're going to be spending on this, maybe 4 hours worth of me drawing on this, and you guys are getting 9 hours, you should start to reach a level of finish similar to this. Notice whites of the eyes, not white. The eye socket was relatively in shadow. The hardness of edges around the shadows indicate a stronger spotlight, which is similar to what we're going to have on the model. Also notice that the elements that are in the shadow side of the face are not nearly as developed as elements in the light. Everything has to be developed proportionally. So as the face is brought more into refinement, now I can start to bring up information in the shadow, but you can't advance information in the shadow prior to information in the light. So for example, I would not draw this jawline out before I advance the facial features. I would not make the nostrils very prominent before advancing the rest of the nose. I have to all bring them up together. I have to always advance the information in the light before the information in the dark. So you can work on white paper for this, and then stump the white paper and develop the drawing thusly, or you can work on toned paper like this, or you can work on white paper and transfer it to toned paper. The choice is yours. If you start on toned paper, remember that we're going to be beginning with charcoal pencils instead of willow. So a 2B is probably going to work out best for you. Select a tone of paper that is between the value of the lights and the darks. So when I saw the model here, I noticed how light the light on her face was, how dark the shadows were, and so I selected a tone of paper that represents a value somewhere between the lights and the darks. So as I shadow map, I'm effectively telling myself where I'm going to be using light pencil and where I'm going to be using the charcoal. And that's going to give you the big advantage with toned paper. If I were to work on, say, a much lighter toned paper than this, then the shadow map I do would be significantly different, because I would have to figure out what value on her is the tone of the paper and start to map out the difference between the light and the dark there, so that my charcoal only ever hits the paper where it needs to go darker. And the white chalk only hits the paper where it needs to go lighter than the paper. So if you select the appropriate toned paper, it'll help you to figure out that shadow mapping a little bit easier.